You know that scene in Goodfellas where Henry Hill is running around on that last day before he gets busted, and it's just chaotic. He's got all these errands to do, and he's just going more and more crazy from everything. That is basically my life right now. It was today, it will be especially tomorrow. Tomorrow's the big one, and kind of Saturday remains to be seen. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I still wanted to get this video out. But seeing as I'm running around all day and just getting back now, very late, and if you're wondering what's up with the lighting, it's I'm using this scene from Suspiria just for some semblance of light because I can't plug in my Christmas lights because there's still no power in this apartment. And if you are wondering why that is, please refer to the pinned comment on the last video. Yeah, I tried to deal with that today. Anyway, that is something for another time. So, what I'm here to do is to knock out a quick video because I keep wanting to make these, and I wasn't sure what to do. And I remembered that there has been one comment on the last 5 videos, I believe, because on the last one, they said, "This is the fifth time I'm asking this." In a more polite way. I realize I phrased that rather aggressively, but that was not the intention, and that's not what it was like. But they were asking what it would be like for Armaldo to have access to both knockoff and rapid spin in advance. So, well, the basic gist of Armaldo in advance is that it's a knockoff user. Unfortunately, the two moves are illegal, and everyone who gets into advance and it starts. Once you move past the metagame standards, you start looking at the more underrated things. Then you look at this Armaldo thing. You're like, wow, this has some really cool traits. Great dual stab. I mean, this is the coverage that Heracross uses, and Armaldo gets stab on both of them. I mean, that's great. It's got Swords Dance. Got some nice physical bulk, and it has some amazing moves in knockoff and rapid spin. I mean, those go perfectly together, right? And then they are crestfallen as they discover that they are not legal together. So most of the time you will see knockoff on Armaldo because knockoff is rarer on viable Pokemon than rapid spin, number one. Number two, knockoff is so widespread in its effect that it pretty much guarantees you will achieve something with it. And Armaldo's defensive profile, while unique and certainly serviceable, is also not something so reliable that you are going to be getting it in game in or constantly during a game. You will generally have to pick your spots a little bit, a la that other knockoff user, Hariyama. I mean, those spots are huge, of course, but they are also more specific than the standards of the tier. And the reason why you prefer knockoff is because you're going to guarantee something gets done, right? And with spin, then, I mean, it's not bad, but the thing is, you are just generally going to be better off with other spinners who have wider defensive profiles. With Armaldo's limited defensive profile, when you get it in on the field, you want to you want to make sure something is done, and spin turns it into a much more passive Pokemon. Whereas with knockoff, or even other things it can do, it's a pretty good Swords Dancer. With knockoff, then you are guaranteeing something is done. Whereas with rapid spin, I mean, it's not very good into any of the spikers. So you just kind of had this mediocre defensive Pokemon, or this like okay defensive Pokemon that's not doing much in return if all it offers is spin. It's way too passive and reactive and just not going to be good. So now when you do see Armaldo, you see knockoff, you sometimes see Swords Dance. It can do some very cool things. It can pair the two to pretty good effect because its stabs are so nice. Traditionally, the Armaldo set that has been used in advance has been knockoff, harden, seismic toss, and rest. Sometimes you can even use mimic over harden because the point is to be one of the hardest Snorlax counters in the game. Since you don't fear earthquake, you don't fear focus punch, self-destruct, you resist as well. And if it starts cursing up, that's where harden comes in, or mimic. And mimic can obviously steal like Skarmory spikes or something. But yeah, that's all out pure defensive Armaldo. Its other sets have some other flexibility to it. Knock off utility on like SD, or just knock off 3 attacks. Because what's really cool about Armaldo is whereas Hariyama, its main point of comparison, is more of a check to Tyranitar and Blissey, then Armaldo is more tanking special threats. It's not really that it's a great special tank. It's that it just has enough bulk and just enough bulk to use its great stabs. Or let me rephrase that. It has just enough bulk to use its stab HP bug to threaten offensive Calm Mind Celebi. That's really big. And with special defense investment and psychic neutrality, if you slap Earthquake on it, it can actually. It's not a Super Rachi counter, not by any stretch of the imagination, but excuse me, it does manage to threaten it back with Earthquake quite nicely if you're just really pumping the Spadef. So yeah, it's very unique in that regard. And also, unlike Hariyama, Armaldo is a knockoff user immune to sand. Actually, healing in sand, I mean longevity, name of the game, all that stuff. Thing is, its defensive profile is a little bit on the awkward side because it doesn't really check. I mean, the Snorlax check and it's checking Celebi and Jirachi on top of that can be pretty nice. But you still have to be very careful with it, and it's not plugging a lot of holes in your team that you are going to want covered in the same way that the more common defensive options are. So I would say Hariyama. Well, let's not get into that comparison because I'm way too biased on Hariyama, and yeah. Also, I want to get to bed. Yeah. So now we know what Armaldo does. And in this theoretical scenario where it gets knockoff and rapid spin, obviously it improves a ton. So remember how we said that rapid spin is bad on Armaldo as is because it makes it into a passive reactive Pokemon. Well, when you've got that's the other thing I wanted to say, that Armaldo's defensive typing is kind of awkward because it kind of checks these things, but it's weak to a lot. I mean, the surf and rock weaknesses mean, the water and rock weaknesses, I should say, mean that it is going to be. Oh, excuse me. It's going to be hit super effectively by a lot. And it's not only that, it's also that it's hit neutrally by a lot. Fire and ground. So, yeah, it really has to be kept in good shape. So, I mean, it's nice to pair it with Wish support, but it doesn't really gel super perfectly with any of the Wish users. So, Jirachi probably the best one because Spadef Jirachi teams with Wish Protect, they tend to be more passive damage focused without having true special walling power, and thus they can sometimes run into trouble against the offensive Calm Minders, and that's where Armaldo comes in to take on the Celebi and Jirachi, ideally. The opposing Super Rachi, of course. But yeah, in this universe where Armaldo gets knockoff and rapid spin, then you have the amazing benefit of running a rapid spinner that also makes such direct progress. One of the criticisms often levied at Claydol, and one that was remedied when it started running Explosion more instead of the more passive option of Refresh, was good lord, excuse me. That was not very becoming of me, but I'm going to go take care of that afterwards because I have to get this done. Yeah, so where the hell was I? Okay, yeah. So with with knockoff and rapid spin, then you have a rapid spinner. I would advise against using it as a spinner, on teams that need to keep spikes off at all costs. But then again, those are most spin teams in general. I mean, just today I saw a discussion about how Fortress is at its best when the teams it's on don't need it to spin 100% of the time. If your team just completely collapses to spikes, if you're going to get, if you let spikes go up, then it's a bad team. So, even teams with bulky Starmie. And Claydol obviously alleviates that by being immune to spikes itself partially. But when Claydol was in its pure refresh stage, that was the biggest thing. Yeah, okay, it's pretty good at keeping off spikes, but it exerts no pressure in return. And with Explosion, it becomes a bona fide useful Pokemon in pretty much every matchup to some extent. So with Armaldo, it's kind of a similar story, where honestly you don't even look at it as a spinner first. It's a knockoff user that can also spin. If you suddenly gave Hariyama the option to use rapid spin, which is a great visual, of course, then you would take it, right? I mean, it's not like you're suddenly going to be relying on Hariyama, to destroy Skarmory for you, but it's a very nice bonus. And again, I really am very sorry for this, but if it gets too much worse, then I'll go get like a tissue or something. But um, yeah, uh, good lord. Uh, um, yeah, no, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm sure that was a frightening visual, me just slithering out of the darkness like that. Um, you're either welcome or I apologize, depending on where you stand on horror movies and things like that. So, what a horrifying prospect. Spinning, knocking Armaldo in advance OU. Okay, so yeah, knock off first, spin second, and with the spin, it also balances out because when you do wind up using it for the spin, it's not even as a bonus. Let's say there is a game where you really like having the option to go spin to spin with it effectively. What you are the problem you want to avoid with spinners is handing the uh, good lord. I apologize for my disheveled all this. Uh, yeah, with spinners, you want to avoid handing the momentum back to the opponent. That's a big criticism of Fortress. It's like, oh, it can threaten the spin, but then Skarm, Gengar wind up doing their thing against it anyway, and what was the point? An ongoing debate. But with something like Claydol, then it's like, yes, it spins. It can still give Skarm back its leftovers and whatever, but with Explosion, it's alleviated. So it's the same kind of logic with with knockoff Armaldo. Or if you look at Bulky Starmie, for example, that can land some Thunder Waves that can be very useful. So, but it can also, fall into this trap, but not nearly as badly generally as Fortress or Boomless Claydol. So, God, never fails to amaze me how beautiful Suspiria is. Anyway, so yes, you're knocking off first and foremost because that's Armaldo's thing. You switch in, you have some nice entry points, and you are really putting yourself at an advantage in terms of the whole war of attrition going on with knockoff and everything, and the fact that you heal yourself in sand, or you are healing yourself rather. And I'm sure you could, put protect on it, knock off, spin, protect, and HP bug, and just be the stupidest thing ever. But yeah, there's that, and the fact that when you are spinning, then you prevent the opponent from really taking advantage of you because they would mostly take advantage of the rapid spinner by taking the opportunity to heal up their Skarm, for example, which Skarm loves doing against 4A Claydol, and that, or just generally kind of resetting and being able to put pressure on you. And when you have knockoff, then you are pretty much denying such an enormous portion of what that would be that it makes the spin much easier. Of course, with knockoff against the biggest spin blocker, Gengar, I mean, a knocked off Gengar is dead meat, and to really seal the deal, you're not going to have much of a difficult time slapping Pursuit Tar there anyway. So, if you even need it necessarily, I don't think you do. Yeah, so it's generally going to fit on balanced teams, bulk, maybe bulky offense too, but generally, more because bulky offense, if you really want knockoff, which you should sometimes, likes Hariyama because Hariyama hits more directly with big focus punches, stab focus punches, guts, things like that. And Armaldo wants to take the pace a little more leisurely, so you could do all sorts of stuff. Yeah, you could, but generally going to be some like mid-paced, mid-range kinds of stuff. Spikes, no spikes. Yeah, generally places you would fit Hariyama are going to be pretty good, but it's not a one-for-one change. Of course, you open up more avenues because you have a knockoff, and not only are their defensive profiles not interchangeable, but God, I really need to rest. I apologize. Not only are their defensive niches not interchangeable, but now you are going to open up new avenues in the team builder because with Hariyama, you don't need a spinner, but you generally really like one. And it's also easy to fit Starmie or Claydol alongside it, so not the hardest thing in the world. But with Armaldo having that knock pressure and that ability to spin in the same exact slot is really, really, really valuable. And suddenly you don't need that slot on Claydol or Starmie, and you are going to be able to, let's just take a random balance team. Hariyama, Blissey, Starmie, Metagross, Salamence, T-Tar. I generally think that kind of style is really, really solid. And you throw Armaldo there. Now, again, you still are going to have to cover things that Starmie would help you with, like Metagross. Like, once you combine the Hariyama Starmie slots into Armaldo there, so you have Armaldo, Blissey, Metagross, Salamence, T-Tar. I mean, still very good, but your Metagross answer is terribly lacking. But that's where you can throw in a Milotic. For example, you have that Metagross answer, you have a great Mixments answer, which you could very much appreciate there. So yeah, you can imagine where it would go from there. That's just one example. It could be a Suicune if you liked. Could be Vaporeon if you wanted more wish support. That might actually be pretty nice, actually. Yeah, so those are some answer options, especially because I really like Hariyama alongside Vaporeon already, because Vaporeon generally suffers from being pretty good against offense, but it is very passive, and against defensive teams, this is especially exploitable. So you are able to. This is what you generally want in team building, to be able to flip those matchups like that. You face an offense matchup where Hariyama gets overwhelmed a little more easily. I still think Hariyama is good against offense, but that's another discussion. Then okay, that's fine. That's where you lean on Vaporeon or whatever. And in those defensive matchups where Hariyama shines, you don't need Vaporeon to do as much defensive heavy lifting. All you really needed to do is wish to the Hariyama over and over. So similar case with Armaldo, but remember, because with Hariyama and our Vaporeon, you still need that spinner for both of them. I mean, for a team that slow paced, yes, absolutely. I'm sure you could concoct some sort of offensive Hariyama, offensive Vaporeon stuff, but we're talking strictly defensive Vaporeon stuff here. So yeah, now on this team, you don't need Hariyama or knockoff user plus Vaporeon plus spinner, because your knockoff user is also the spinner. So I think that's basically all I wanted to say. I hope you enjoyed this. I apologize for my subpar presentation. So bear with me a little longer until I get the hell out of this nightmarish apartment situation. And yeah. Okay, that is about it. Watch Suspiria from 1977 if you haven't. I don't care for the remake. I mean, it has some cool ideas, but overall, I don't know. I just don't know about Guadagnino, but yeah. I appreciate that he's an original voice, though. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.